when the crew of a U.S. Air Force F-15E Strike Eagle ejected over Iran's Zagros Mountains on April 3, 2026, and became separated on the ground. Only one of the pilots was found after 2 hours. The other one was found after 2 days of searching using a top-secret new technology that many still don't believe exists. It wasn't through a working radio, a visible beacon, or even a thermal signature. According to multiple reports, he was located with help from a CIA-linked system known as Ghost Murmur. For decades, the logic of concealment stated that if someone could hide from radar, suppress radio emissions, or reduce infrared signature, then that would be enough to stay hidden. Entire aircraft programs were built around that logic, from radar cross-section shaping to thermal management and electronic silence. Ghost Murmur points towards something far more unsettling. It's not a search tool aimed at radio or at an engine. This is a search tool aimed at the human body itself. Public reporting describes Ghost Murmur as using quantum magnetometry to detect the faint electromagnetic signal associated with the human heartbeat. It's often described in terms of nitrogen vacancy centers in synthetic diamonds. These microscopic defects in a diamond lattice can act as extremely sensitive magnetic field sensors. The human heart produces tiny electromagnetic signals every time it beats. In medicine, magnetocardiography is used to study them, but usually only at very close range and under carefully controlled conditions. What's been described publicly goes much further: standoff detection. A cardiac magnetic signal is extremely faint, far weaker than the Earth's natural magnetic background. Public estimates put the Earth's field at around 25 to 65 microteslas, while the heart's magnetic signal is many orders of magnitude smaller. In plain English, this is like trying to isolate a whisper inside a stadium-sized field of interference. That's why the sensor alone is not enough. The reporting around Ghost Murmur also points to AI-assisted filtering, which separates a living rhythm from geological noise, infrastructure noise, and everything else in the environment. Unlike radio or heat emissions, which are controllable, a heartbeat is continuous and cannot be turned off. If it can be isolated under the right conditions, then the body itself begins to function as a biosignal. That doesn't mean biology is suddenly easy to read at a distance. The claims surrounding Ghost Murmur are still hotly disputed, especially the biggest ones about how far it can work and how precise it really is. Outside scientists cited in reporting have raised doubts about whether the story really works at the ranges being described. Some say that, given what's publicly known about sensing limits, it would probably only work at much shorter distances, maybe under 100 meters, unless there's some crucial piece missing. If this works at all, it may work in specific low-noise environments where conventional search methods struggle, and where a living body produces one of the few remaining usable signals. A biosignal-based cueing tool would not replace radar, infrared, or radio interception, but rather sit alongside them as a new layer. The unsettling part of Ghost Murmur is that it's grounded in real physics, but pushes it into ranges and conditions that remain heavily debated. Even if the public version is overselling the performance, the larger direction is still worth paying attention to. If the United States has managed even a limited ability to cue off biosignals, then the body itself has entered the search system. For decades, the contest was between stealth and surveillance. This points to something more specific and more uncomfortable: a competition between concealment and the body's own stubborn tendency to keep signaling. That kind of capability isn't likely to remain just a combat rescue tool. It would probably spread into hostage recovery, special operations, and high-value target missions, where hiding starts to depend less on emitted signals and more on whether human presence can be found at all. In March 2026, China used a 96-drone swarm demonstration to suggest something more ambitious than scale. Launched in sequence from a coordinated ground unit, the drones were meant to show that once airborne, the swarm could keep adjusting itself instead of waiting for each new instruction from a human operator. Atlas is the name Chinese state media attached to the broader drone swarm operations system, describing it as, quote, an algorithm-enabled combat upgrade. It's built around the Swarm 2 ground combat launch vehicle, a command vehicle, and a support vehicle. One Swarm 2 is said to launch 48 fixed-wing drones. A command vehicle can reportedly control up to 96 at once. In the demo, they were sent up at roughly 3-second intervals from a coordinated ground unit. By itself, such a massive number is a useful showpiece, but a mass launch is not the highlight of its capabilities. Plenty of militaries can put drones in the air. The harder test begins after launch, once the plan starts breaking. Most drone missions still bottleneck at the same place, the human element. The drone can do the flying, the watching, and the reporting, but a person still has to figure out what it means and make the next call. That keeps the mission inside a human decision cycle, what militaries know as the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. And in war, the side that moves through that cycle faster usually gains the advantage. A distributed swarm is built to move faster than a human-led formation can. It isn't thinking the way a person does, but it can still shift routes, swap roles, and reorder targets faster than a human-led formation usually can. Chinese reporting says the Atlas swarm can divide into smaller groups, coordinate against multiple targets, and shift between roles like reconnaissance, strike, and communications relay while the mission is still unfolding. It also says the swarm can distinguish a command vehicle from 3 visually similar targets, which is a much more specific claim than simply saying drones are autonomous. That architecture also makes a swarm like this tougher to knock out. A missile battery tends to have centralized logic and clearer failure points. Chinese reporting goes further, saying the swarm can compensate for airflow disturbances, avoid mid-air collisions, and make real-time positional adjustments within the formation. None of this is hard proof that Atlas would work the way it's being sold in actual combat. Since the claims come from state media, they're better read as statements of ambition than as verified battlefield performance. Still, the demonstration was pointing to something larger. The claim was not just that China could launch large numbers of drones simultaneously, but that the system could keep operating, despite various disruptions. This does not mean that Atlas is invincible. The United States still has ways to attack parts of the problem. Systems in the Army's terrestrial layer system family can disrupt drone links. The Army has already invested about $100 million in TLS-BCT manpack procurement, training, and fielding, which at least gives a sense of how seriously this part of the counter-drone fight is being treated. Directed energy weapons, such as DEM SHORAD and the Navy's Helios laser, are built to engage small drones without expending high-cost interceptors. DEM SHORAD, for example, is built around a 50-kilowatt class laser mounted on a Striker platform and is specifically designed to engage groups 1 through 3 drones. More traditional layered defenses still have a role, like Patriot PAC-3s, NASAMs firing AMRAAMs, Stingers, and counter-UAS interceptors like Coyote, but often at a punishing cost imbalance when the missile is worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars and the drone is not. And because the deeper challenge sits in the software, the United States is also building its own answer through JADC2 and platforms like Anduril's Lattice, designed to move targeting data across the network at machine speed. If systems like Atlas mature further, the contest may no longer be defined mainly by whose missile flies farther or whose drone stays up longer. With systems like this in place, it may all come down to whose code can make sense of a chaotic battlefield faster and keep adapting after the first plan falls short. North Korea says its latest 3-day test cycle included 3 of the dirtiest battlefield tools in modern war: a cluster warhead ballistic missile, an electromagnetic system, and a carbon fiber blackout bomb. The worst part is how well they fit together. These components, one spreading explosives across roughly 17.2 acres with a space of 10 soccer fields, another meant to disrupt electronics and military systems, and the third capable of shutting down the grid without physical disruption, create a system whose primary objective is to make recovery slower, more dangerous, and significantly more difficult to manage. At the center of the April 6th to 8th launch cycle was what analysts believe to be a Hwasong-11 short-range ballistic missile, better known outside North Korea as the KN-23. This means this is not an old Scud, flying a tall, predictable arc. The KN-23 uses a depressed quasi-ballistic trajectory and seems capable of flying about 150 to 435 miles in the types of tests North Korea has described. Outside estimates often place its top range near 430 miles, and is widely assessed to maneuver in the terminal phase. In simple terms, it flies lower, flatter, and maneuvers more than older North Korean missiles. More importantly, it has more than enough range to reach any point in South Korea. And the missile itself was only part of the problem. The warhead choice made it worse. A conventional warhead is built to destroy one target: a bunker, a radar, a hangar, a command post. A cluster warhead is built to break an area. Instead of a single explosion, the warhead opens in the air and scatters dozens or potentially hundreds of submunitions over a broad area. North Korea claims the footprint is large enough to cover a runway section, a highway interchange, an air defense site, and the roads around them. Submunitions are notorious for dud rates. The exact number depends on the design, the fuse, the terrain, and the angle of impact. But cluster munitions globally have long been criticized because unexploded submunitions can remain dangerous after the strike, even when the weapon functions as intended. They're small enough to disappear into debris, grass, rooftops, or roadside dirt, and unstable enough to end whoever finds them later. That's what makes the other two weapons in this test cycle more important. A carbon fiber blackout weapon is designed to cripple a power grid. It spreads conductive filaments over substations, transformers, and transmission lines, triggering short circuits and wider cascading failures. And that is the point, because a city's infrastructure does not have to be destroyed to be shut down. Similar graphite-style blackout munitions have already been used in war. During the 1991 Gulf War, the United States used graphite-based blackout weapons against Iraq and reportedly knocked out about 85% of the country's electricity supply. The same approach was used again in Iraq in 2003, when coalition forces targeted electrical distribution facilities with carbon fiber bombs designed to incapacitate rather than permanently destroy. The individual components of North Korea's tests are not revolutionary. Cluster bombs and blackout weapons are old. EMP concepts have been used since the Cold War. What is new is the way they were presented together as layers. Once one of these warheads opens, it becomes a dispersion event. Even a late interception may not solve the real problem if the payload has already begun to spread. None of this confirms a settled doctrine, and North Korea's claims should never be taken at face value, but the technical pattern is still visible. Systems like Patriot and THAAD can still intercept ballistic missiles, but they are built to stop the delivery vehicle, not everything that happens after it. If a warhead has already dispersed, or the grid has already been disrupted, the fight shifts from air defense to resiliency. The deeper implication is that the battle may not be decided at the moment of impact. It may be decided in the hours after, when engineers could not reach the substation, crews could not safely clear the runway, and air defenses are still protecting a site that no longer functions. In that kind of fight, the side under attack is not only trying to survive the strike, but actively trying to outrun the damage after the strike. And that is a much harder race to win. The Marine Corps just gave itself a new set of eyes at the edge of the battlefield, and they come with explosives attached. Attack drones are moving out of the experiment phase and into the battlefield. After standing up the Marine Corps Attack Drone Team, or MCAD-T, on January 3, 2025, at Quantico's Weapons Training Battalion, the Corps has since approved new small UAS training requirements and launched a larger push to certify hundreds more Marines. The team was publicly showcased on March 7, 2025, during a live demonstration using the Neros Archer FPV drones. They have a stated goal of equipping all infantry, reconnaissance battalions, and littoral combat teams to employ FPV attack drone capabilities by May 2026. While the formal course pipeline continues to expand, through basic drone operator, attack drone operator, payload specialist, instructor, and attack drone leader tracks. In the meantime, Marines are being trained on armed FPV drones and similar small attack systems. The public reporting does not pin down a standard warhead, but the class of drone now being discussed can reportedly carry payloads of around 4.5 pounds, out to roughly 12.4 miles. To use it, a Marine launches the drone from cover and flies it by live video through a crossbow, a portable tactical ground station. Keeping it low enough to use terrain and structures for concealment, the Marine flies until a target appears into view. From there, the drone can be corrected in real time and driven straight into the point of aim. As it does, the screen cuts on impact, confirming the hit. Outside defense reporting says the Marine Corps has been working with anti-personnel, anti-material, and explosively foreign penetrator payload options for this class of system. However, the warhead is only part of it. These aircraft are also low-cost sensors, transmitting live video and generating a target picture the Corps increasingly wants to share across a larger network. For a long time, targeting followed a basic pattern. A sensor spotted the target. The report went up the chain. Command checked it and approved the strike, and only then did the shooter act. Each extra step slowed things down, and every handoff created another point where the process could break. Through efforts like Project Dynamis, the Marine Corps is pushing toward a larger network built to, quote, aggregate, orchestrate, analyze, and share fused data at machine speeds. That means the drone feed isn't being used like just another local video stream. It's being handled as targeting data that can move across a joint network. That is how this becomes a kill web, producing the data that allows other parts of the network to act and pointing toward a US force that's less centralized, less sequential, and harder to decapitate. The Marine at the edge is no longer just spotting a target for someone else, but is becoming part of the mechanism that compresses detection, confirmation, and strike into one continuous process. As for the cost, the Marines are leaning into small attack drones that can reach roughly 6 to 12 miles at less than $5,000 per unit. A system cheaper than a used sedan can now reach beyond line of sight and begin targeting. For comparison, a Tomahawk costs around $1 to $2 million per shot, while an F-35 burns through tens of thousands of dollars per flight hour before releasing a weapon. The gap is not subtle.